Fit FM is owned and operated by Communication Company Limited, located in Stuart Castle, Duncan's Trelawney, Jamaica. We broadcast on FM 96.7 locally and is heard worldwide on fitfmja.com. Our mission is to amplify diverse voices and opinions, inform, educate, entertain, and engage listeners of all ages and lifestyle while promoting responsible community development. Fit FM 96.7, your life, your music.
Destigmatize, the Western Regional Health Mental Wellness radio program, right here on Fit FM 96.7, every Thursday at 6 p.m. Destigmatize, to raise mental awareness and reduce stigma and discrimination through education, discussions, and highlights. Join us for lived experience interviews, to learn from the experts, for the Brainwaves Educational Focus segment, and Your Time, where you get answers to your questions. With host Dr. Lisbeth Crossman, psychiatrist. So join us every Thursday at 6 p.m. for Destigmatize on Fit FM 96.7. Brought to you by the Western Regional Health Authority, Department of Mental Wellness.
That's just what I seek to find. Oh yeah, I ain't in the mood. I just need some solitude. Where are you now? When darkness seems to end. Where are you now? When the world is crumbling. Oh, I hear you say, look up, child. Hey, look up, child. Hey. Where are you now? When all I feel is doubt. Where are you now? When I can't figure it out. Oh, I hear you say, look up, child. Hey, look up, child. Hey, look up, child. Hey.
Welcome, friends. We're right here on Fit FM 96.7. Another Thursday evening, and we're speaking about mental health issues, raising the awareness to these issues, and how we can work together as a community to deal with these issues, to bring about change. And we're talking about good mental health, we're talking about positive things, and we want persons to come on board to be with us as we destigmatize. That's what we're here to do. I'm your host, Lisabeth Crossman, and I'm the consultant psychiatrist from the Western Regional Health Authority. And we're so glad that you're with us this afternoon. You made my apologies. Sorry, I think I'm going back in time. The day is running so fast. I want to slow it down, but it is evening, and we're a little bit past 6 o'clock, and we're right here on Fit FM 96.7. But you may be with us, and we're so glad that Flo is keeping up its end of the bargain, and we're so happy for that. Remember 2023 positive strides, and so we are there, we are out there, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, we are on Friends Who Love Fit FM and fitfmja.com. Wherever you are, we are so happy that you're joining us today, and we continue to invite you. Talk to us, send us your comment, tell us what's happening, and probably some questions you may have. So you can WhatsApp us on 876-478-9144 or 876-317-1041. 1991. So that's 876-478-9144 or 876-317-99. I think I went wrong. So it's 876-317-1991. Let me do that one again. It's 876-317-1991. And we're stressing it because we want you to talk to us. Tell us give us some questions. You may have some lingering questions. You may just want to pass a comment. We wanting you to reach out to us. So thank you for being a part of us and being a part of the program so far. And we hope that you'd stick with us because we are very excited to have a very dynamic and extraordinary psychiatrist in the person of Dr. Jeffrey Walcott. I sometimes call him Reverend and Doc, what I mean. We're not going to go there today. We're going to stick with Dr. Jeffrey Walcott. And he's a psychiatrist at Connolly House in Kingston, a wealth of information and knowledge. And we're going to be talking about something that's very topical, violence and mental illness. And I know that you may have some burning questions, and we have Dr. Walcott on with us, and we're going to be having that conversation, looking at some things and going through to see how it is, what it is that we can do, what's the roots, where we're coming from with all of this. Why is Jamaica like this at this point in time, probably, or it was like this all along, but we're just talking about it a little bit more. So we're just so glad that he's able to join us. And welcome, Dr. Walcott.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're with us. And we're going right up your alley because I know you're good at story, and you the aspect of violence, and mental illness. And probably you can take us back as to, how it is that we started off like this, probably the mental illness, probably the violence. What is happening? Is there any correlation at all into what has happened in the past and how we have probably inherited some things? I don't know. Tell us.
So when you look at the history of violence in our country, it's sort of paradoxical.
Okay.
Because there is a paper that was actually published that look at the murder rate over time since colonial days.
Interesting.
And what you found is that the murder rates during those times were actually very similar to what we have now. Mm-hmm. And remember, during those times, they reported on murders of free men and women. They didn't even include the enslaved population.
That's interesting.
But out of the 1960s to 1975, Jamaica actually had one of the lowest murder rates in the world.
So what do you think happened at that time? Yes.
So during the independence movement, and during the upward mobility of most of our population, and during the time when you had focus on social justice, you had focus on adult suffrage, you had focus on empowerment. During that and identity that Jamaica was formulating, its identity. During that period, you actually had a very low incidence of murder. And then after the 1978, 79, 80, you had a huge spike in murder rate. And it came back down. But since that time, murder rate has been steadily climbing, irrespective of administration, irrespective of any interventions. It has been steadily. It's now we're now number 2 in the world. So that is something that is very interesting and intriguing when you look at it from a sociological perspective.
Yes.
Because we're coming from a society that was entrenched in violence, and where violence, control, and discipline were actually intermingled. So you're coming from a slave society, a colonial society, where punishments or any form of dissonance from the norm would be met with either murder, torture, and we have a wealth of literature, both from the historian and from the psychiatrist, of the property that occurred during those early years. But the intriguing is what happened in the 60s and 70s, where the population actually was at the height of civility, where persons were focused on nation building. Persons were focused on collaborative community development. And you actually saw people coming and working together. And then the new country had a high levels of national pride, high levels of national identity. And during that period, we saw that actual very peaceful and productive period, which ended around the 1980s, and you started to see slow decline in the civility and the national identity and the national pride. And then you had violence climbing back up almost in a linear fashion as it related to time. So that is one of the most interesting issues with violence.
Dr.
So that's from a historical perspective.
I wanted to also, you mentioned something that I found very interesting, because as we know that in the before universal adult suffrage in the before that 1930s 20s, so you are saying that the murder rate, were you suggesting from that study that the murder rate was high at that time?
Well, they look back as far as the 1800s. In other words, they went to pre-slavery population.
Pre-slavery. Okay.
The pre-emancipation period.
Okay.
And they found that it's almost like a inverse bell curve. You had a gradual decrease during the 30s to the 60s, where 1962 Jamaica was actually the third safest country in the world. Between 62 and 65.
Right.
Were the third lowest murder rate in the world. And then you saw a inclination again. After 1979, 81, there was a huge spike during that period, which we're well aware of historically. But the actual murder rate kept climbing and was on a linear fashion all the way up to present. And there have been a lot of research by our local experts into some of the driving forces and driving factors that we have clear pictures on. And so when you look at something like the pandemic, it is no doubt that after the pandemic, we've seen this flare up where we're now number 2 in the world, and we are seeing a lot of societal disturbances, because the pandemic disrupted probably one of the more stable preventative institutions, which was a school setting. Because when you look at murders, if you look at the persons in prison for murders between the age of 13 to 25, that age group accounts for all other age groups combined. Is a fraction of that age group in terms of the prevalence of persons in prison for committing murders. So it's a problem with young males, and and that's also what has been found worldwide, that young men especially are risk factors for violence. And the other issue that's a risk factor for violence is substance abuse. But when we talk about substance abuse, we often deflect to some of the substances that are more societal taboos, like cocaine and heroin, which we don't have here. But in fact, the substance that is more associated or correlated with violent behavior is alcohol, which is one of the things that we have in rampant access. Our drinking age is much lower than the United States, and we have a huge issue when it comes to alcohol exposure and prevalence of alcohol use and abuse in our population that is not addressed. So we have to factor those issues in when you look at the violent scope, and especially what's been happening with the schools. And I think we are just recognizing not just the educational aspect, but the socialization, the importance of the socialization aspect of schools. And some studies have shown that if a child finishes school, just finish school, goes through the entire school program, irrespective of what they do, they are 10 times less likely to be engaged in criminal or violent activities. So it's a huge protective factor, keeping children in a school system structure as a matter of crime prevention.
Interesting. So you bring up a lot of thoughts now, because I mean, if we are saying that and the research is showing that, is that being translated into how we manage it sometimes? The challenges that arise in schools or in our communities. How do we look at those issues now?
So I think one of the main downfall that we've seen in policy over the years is that there is almost a merging of the business of crime fighting with crime prevention, and they are not the same thing. They are not even related. Crime fighting is a mandate of the constabulary force and national security, but crime prevention is a primarily public health issue. It's a health issue. It's about identifying persons who are at risk, who are having risk factors, which have been well researched. Young unattached youth, persons with poor parental structure, persons with psychological abuse in their childhood, physical abuse, especially in terms of the primary caregiver. But abused children, persons who are inclined to use drugs, use substances, persons who drop out of school, the risk factors are there. So the intervention for crime prevention has to be focused on negating these risk factors by building stronger family connections, educating people on parenting skills, working with at-risk families to strengthen attachment, focusing on giving the resources to the schools to be able to retain students, to be able to provide adequate behavioral and social transformation tools in the schools themselves, so that the teachers can actually be utilizing these tools to make their job easier, because if the children are behaving better, they are better able to impart knowledge. So giving them the tools to be able to structure the classrooms so that you can get the best out of these kids, and providing the support that is necessary in the community setting to promote community cohesion, to promote community collaboration. And these are things which are not alien or foreign. And there have been multiplicity of programs that have been developed over the years, that have been piloted, that have been shown to be successful. But what they require is institutionalization to be able to impact the wider society. And therefore, they have to be the focus of the governmental agencies and the governing bodies. So they have to put the fuel behind these programs, which work. And that is where the problem lies, because there's a inclination to focus only on the crime fighting aspect. So you're going to lock down a community, you're going to go in and root out the criminals. Yes, but what are you going to do for the 10 or 12-year-old child who is enticed by the scammer lifestyle, chopper lifestyle, the issue of respect through gun, bad manism and develop a sense of identity. What are you going to do for that child? All you're going to do is wait until that child commits a crime, and then you have a cycle going on, when we could have prevented it. And we can prevent these things, because it has been shown, it has been proven that with proper targeted social interventions at the various age groups, you can in fact reduce transgressive behavior and crime burden by a significant percentage factor. And I think that is where the critical issue is, because we often have the inclination that in this country that the thing with discipline and punishment go hand in hand, but they do not. Discipline and punishment have nothing to do with each other. Discipline is about teaching people how to behave in an appropriate manner and rewarding for that. Punishment is something that you do after a crime has been committed or after something has gone wrong. It's a totally different system. And we're very good at focusing on the punitive, but we're not very good on focusing on the issues of developing discipline, developing social structures, re-socialization. And because they take time and they take a lot more effort than to lock somebody up for 20 or 30 or for what the new thing is now, 35 years. So and focus on preventing that child from committing a murder, rather than focusing our attention on putting him in prison for 35 years and removing him from the society as a productive member, and putting him at the behest of the taxpayers, because they have to pay for his meals for years when he's in prison. So we have to be mindful that we have to have a multifaceted approach, because we're just bailing water out of a boat with a hole, and we're not plugging the hole.
I wanted to ask you though, Dr. Walcott, you spoke about taking it from a multifaceted approach, and I know that you have looked at several programs that have happened in different communities, and the how it is that the evidence that points to the efficiency and the efficacy of these programs. Can you speak to any of those programs and perhaps what were some of the challenges in not getting it institutionalized so that they carried forward?
All right. So when we look at behavioral transformation, we take a lifestyle approach.
All right.
So we know that, for example, the first 1,000 days of life is the most critical, because that's where the child learns attachment issues and where the child's development is critical. And so there are programs that have been developed through the Early Childhood Commission, through several other entities that have focused on supporting parents, ensuring nutrition is adequate, ensuring parenting skills are taught, and they can be expanded and globalized. They require, of course, funding as with everything else, and institutionalized training, training persons and targeting young mothers with children from 0 to 3, and providing them with the support, the skill set, and the social resources that are necessary, and the financial resources necessary to be able to care for that child. That's one aspect.
Right.
We have been working on a program, and after that, the child goes to what they call basic school or
the kindergarten.
And there has been a program. I think Dr. Hemingway had developed a program called IRI Toolbox that focused on providing emotionally intelligent tools for teachers in that young age group to be substituted for corporal punishment. That you can use these tools to guide the kids outside of resorting to corporal punishment, which is illegal anyway. And we now have focused on a particular critical area. It's the prepubescent, the pre-adolescent period. There's a critical window between the age of 8 to 10 that we have a way of targeting these kids at that age and actually transforming the ones who are most at risk using psychological interventions based in culture, based in creative arts, based in drama, based in play, and allowing the children who are most at risk to learn or to re-socialize them in the cultural therapy process. And we call this the Dreamer World Cultural Therapy Program, which was developed both as a therapeutic modality as well as a preventative modality. In other words, you could use the cultural therapy process in all the children, and you could build resilience, you could build social skills, you could build collaborative skill sets, group working skill sets, and that would be targeted. And there are other interventions then would have to be put in place now for the adolescents, and the adolescents respond more to more athletic programs. So twinning social and psychological intervention with athletics programs. I've worked, for example, with football teams that have not only had success on the field, but where you've seen transformation in the behavioral pattern, socialization pattern, and the thinking patterns of these boys when you twin a psychological intervention with activity that they are motivated to be engaged in and that they enjoy. As you get older, what has been shown is as you get older, the actual intensity of the intervention has to increase to provide the same change. And in the adult population, it becomes less group focused and more individual focused. And it's those persons now that will end up being treated by the mental health services, by the psychiatrists, by the psychologists, the ones that are not, have fallen
have not responded positively.
But that's a tiny percentage. But that's a tiny percentage. I agree. And for those, you can actually do that if you're able to put the preventative measures in place, so you don't get a deluge of children or adults that could have been diverted from earlier. So you're looking at a funneling effect where you're reducing the problem significantly by starting earlier and getting a bigger bang for your buck.
So if you imagine it as a triangle, as we always use it, if we tackle the problems at the base, then you won't have the challenges. Only the few would come apex of the triangle, and therefore your resources are going to, and we have so many resources that are available that really, yes, we need funding, but there are so many things that we can do at the community level, as you mentioned before, within our schools, within our faith-based organization, and the football field, as you mentioned, so there are so many things that we can do. But Dr. Walcott and my guests would love to know who you are. Let me just remind them that we're speaking with Dr. Jeffrey Walcott, and I call him psychiatrist extraordinaire from Connolly House. He's actually one of the vice president as well of the Jamaica Psychiatric Association and past president as well. And he is speaking with us on mental illness and violence. And we're actually looking at how it is, what was some of the root causes of violence, and how it is that we can look at some programs, what really is happening to our people, and how we can look at some programs to address some of these. We're going to take a small break and then come right back to talk to Dr. Walcott in this conversation. Very interesting conversation. Soon come back. Don't leave.
Destigmatize, the Western Regional Health Mental Wellness Radio Program, right here on Fit FM 96.7 every 6 p.m. Destigmatize, to raise mental awareness and reduce stigma and discrimination through education, discussions, and highlights. Join us for lived experience interviews, to learn from the experts, for the Brainwaves Educational Focus segment, and Your Time, where you get answers to your questions. With host Dr. Lisbeth Crossman, the psychiatrist. So join us every Thursday at 6 p.m. for Destigmatize on Fit FM 96.7. Brought to you by the Western Regional Health Authority, Department of Mental Wellness.
That's just what I see.
Welcome. You're right here on Destigmatize, a very interesting conversation with our extraordinary psychiatrist, Dr. Jeffrey Walcott. And we're right here on Fit FM 96.7. You may be on YouTube, you may be on Facebook. Friends who love Fit FM, Fit FM, my apologies, and fitfm@ja.com. fmja.com. Welcome. We're so glad that you have joined us. A very interesting conversation. But before we go on, Dr. Walcott, Imara is saying that we need to look at structural psychological violence perpetrated by the state. What are your thoughts?
Well, in 1969, there's a seminal paper on the construct of violence.
Yes.
That was published by Johann Galtung.
Yes.
That identifies 3 layers of violence.
Yes.
There's the interpersonal.
Yes.
There's the structural, and there's the cultural violence.
Yes.
And what he postulated was that there's actually a pyramidal effect, like an iceberg.
Yes.
What we're able to see and recognize is interpersonal, because it is readily in front of us.
Yes.
But the interpersonal is driven by what he terms structural violence. And structural violence has to do with inequity. It's the inequity in the distribution of resources.
Definitely.
The equity in power to determine how the resources are distributed. So when there's inequity, it automatically causes interpersonal violence, because it stigmatizes one group over another. And it allows for the justification of violence against that group. So when you look at Jamaican violence, for example, you recognize that it is not widespread all over the country. In fact, this is the most widespread it has been in the past. In 15 or 20 years ago, it was confined to probably 2 parishes at best. And now it is spread to 5 out of 14. Out of 14. And even when you look within those parishes, the areas of violence are also constrained to specific locations and specific areas. And that's not without design. And so that's the issue of structural violence. But structural violence is on a huge bedrock that is often very well hidden. And that is the concept of cultural violence. And cultural violence are the belief systems and structures that permeate the society, that allow for discrimination and allow for the justification of violence towards the citizens of the country. And one of the biggest cultural violence that has ever been enacted on any people in the world, violence enacted by slavery, of the fact that people of African descent were thought of as being less than human. Dehumanization. 3/5 in fact. A fraction. And it is the thought of dehumanization of a group of people that allow for structural violence, where institutions do not provide standard above substandard care or above substandard quality to a group of people, because they feel that these people either do not deserve it, can appreciate it. And you saw a lot of these things happening in the newsroom, and it is inculcated not just in a small group of people in the country, but in the mass of the population. There are very few people who have written about it. As Bob Marley would say, the ones who have not elevated themselves out of mental slavery. Because you see it, you have institutions, you have organizations. There's something in the paper recently about the bathroom condition of the health center. It took 1 day for it to be transformed. But why wasn't it done before? Because of the people that it served and what are colonial and racist and post-slavery ancestry, drilling the heads of the people about what people deserve in this country. And we see it all the time where there's a huge backlash about the greatness and the humanity of the people who are born and raised in this country, our fellow Jamaicans. There's a huge aspect with cultural violence in this country, a huge problem. And that permeates our governmental agencies, permeates our institutions, permeates the healthcare system, permeates all across the country. But there have been people in this country who've been able to overcome that, who have been able to transcend it, and who have been able to act in a way of great civility. And in fact, when we did the study looking at the problems in the society, we realized that 60% of Americans are forward-thinking people who are, in fact, very productive, highly socially adept and contribute to the society. It's only a small percent, less than the majority, which is 40%, at various degrees of severity, have what the Western psychiatry coined personality problems or personality disorders. But Hickling, when he did the analysis, he really thought that the most appropriate name for it was Shakatane, which is power problem. People who have power with problems. And these are the same people, who think that the solution to a violent country is to be more violent than the violent producers, which is a part of the same pathology. In other words, it is shared pathology. It is just expressed differently only because of the social circumstances in which the person is born. But they have the same madness. And so that is the challenge that we are faced with. Because the prevalence, as we found, permeates the Jamaican society. There is no congregation in any one area. It permeates all aspects of society. 40% in various social classes, various groups. There is that 40% that causes problems, of which only 10% of that 40% is it severe enough to undermine the entire fabric of the organization that they are a part of, as we've seen recently in the news with the issue with the financial sector. We've seen what damage most of these people can cause in terms of the damage for the social group that they're in. The issue of violence, and that is an act of violence. It is depriving someone of something that they have worked for, without any thought or empathy about what the impact will be on that person. It's an act of violence. So we recognize that there's only the minority of the people in this country that have these problems. And so we have to put the systems in place to help prevent the manifestation of this madness into adulthood from early, because it costs less. The earlier we are able to impact, the less it will cost over time. And then we can have a transformation in our country in the next 15 to 20 years. But the problem that we have is that most people can only see in front of their noses.
That is a problem.
There's a wonderful quote that I said that the world grows good when old men plant trees, the shade of which they will never see. We have to start thinking about the collective. And we are caught up in this individualistic narcissism that is poisoning and strangling not just the country, but the entire world and the species. In 1960s, 50s and 60s, when there was a Cuban Missile Crisis, there's a doomsday clock that was developed to shock the world into action as to when your existence is certain. During the Missile Crisis, it was at 5 minutes and people were panicking. Last year, the clock was moved to 100 seconds and nobody but become so comfortable with our own extinction, with all the things that are destroying the planet and all the things that are destroying the species, that we have given it no regard. And so that is part of the challenge that we have to start to reclaim. We have to gain narcissism. We have to gain this individualistic drive to collect shiny things. The same thing that the monkeys in the savannah do, to collect collecting more garbage. And start realizing that the aspect of human life is to work as a collective. We can only get further together. We can only build as a group, as a community, as a country, as a world. And we have to on the same track, where we are invested not just in ourselves but in the collective. And that's why I want to tell you the important aspect of community building.
Yes.
I'm now guest editor on an article for Frontier in Psychiatry about building resilience through healing communities.
Interesting.
Healing has to take place within the community.
Yes.
And I know there's a wonderful program called the Friendship Bench out of Zimbabwe, my dear friend Dixon Chibanda, who has been working with using the elders of the community to provide psychosocial and psychological support for persons going through this depression.
Yes.
Because it is a translation of experience. It is a connection of humanity.
I agree.
These are the things that counter and negate negative emotional responses.
And that's
help people
and that's a very interesting evidence that you have given using the elderly persons, because not only are they going to offer that psychosocial support, but with their wealth of experience, they are able to also transfer some of the knowledge and oral traditions that may have happened in the community, and in so doing, bringing back some of the things that would have brought the communities and families together, that they would share together, that they would, play together, be together, and that it helps in building the community. So it's taking it in all the various aspects of health, looking at the various aspects to help to build the community. That's a very wonderful experience that you have shared.
Yeah, we are also reminded, because WHO has expanded its definition.
Yes.
Health is not just about physical or even mental.
Yes.
It is about the entire contextualization of being.
Yes.
How you are connected to the people around you, how you are connected to your purpose, to your systems of belief,
definitely,
to the things you interact with at all levels of your existence. And so we have to start thinking global or unilaterally in the way we view this issue of existence. We have to recognize that individualism is a delusion. Human beings cannot survive as individuals in any of the environmental places that you have. We have our very survival depends on our ability to work with other people.
True.
Our very survival.
Yes.
We have to get food, or we get food from all over the world. Our clothing is prepared from all over. Everything has to work together in a complete unit. And one of the things I must say that has been very disheartening is, and it happens in some of our colleagues internationally as well, that they are pushing a lot of this bravado foolishness about alpha male and this and that. And the reality is that human socialization pattern is not like pack animals. We're not wolves. We are not lions. Our socialization patterns are more like ants. Our entire community is built on the fact that every single person can play a part, so that the unit is the collective. The unit is it's not the individual or even the family. It is the collective. The community is the unit. And we have to play our role so that our community, our collective can move forward and can be sustainable and can expand and can achieve great things. Because the species achieve great things,
Yes.
But we are at a crossroads where we will end up being one of the only species on this planet that has directly played a hand in its extinction. And we have to think carefully, because we have to realize, and that's why the 60s and 70s in this country was so important and critical, because the level of collectivism, the level of nationalism, the level of national pride, the level of camaraderie, the level of connectivity to others was at its highest. And we see what the results are, because we had some of the most forward-thinking policies that were ever developed. We led the way in 1978, 79. We actually helped the WHO in crafting its public health policy.
Yes,
we were a beacon for the entire world.
Yes.
And we can be that again, because it's in our DNA. As I said to the young boys that would play the football team that I was working with, greatness is ingrained in your genetics. It is for you to unleash it and unlock it and stop it and go out and achieve it, and by working together. And so this is the important thing that we have to get back to in our society. We have to re-socialize, reconnect, and refocus our attention not on individual individual success or individual achievement or individual acquisition. Because we don't focus on success or achievement. We just want to get things. We have to refocus it and focus on building our nation, building our society, building our community, leaving our legacy by ensuring that others that come before us will have a better life than we had. By planting trees that we will never see the shade of, but that the next generation will benefit. And our part in the forming of the people of this country.
Yeah,
that's how we get out of violence.
Yes, so we have to go. We have a lot of work to do, Dr. Jeffrey, because it means that I know you have been very vocal about it, but how do we move it forward? I know the programs, but and the funding. How do we let people wake up and listen? The policy makers, the program developers, the community leaders. How do we move it forward?
What you have to do is start.
You say you. It's we.
I've been doing nothing, and I've worked one step at a time. We have to focus on one area. It takes one person.
Yeah.
Because it just takes the right one person to catalyze and transform the world. You have to just start small. If you wait on resources,
nothing will happen. I agree.
And once you start with that one person,
yes.
Freddie Hickling used to say,
start under the tree. Yes, I remember. Yes.
And go stand up under the tree. People think that you're crazy, and you just have to focus on one community, on one group of people, and focus on them and give them the tools, give them the because that's what Dixon started Jabana in Zimbabwe. He started with one grandmother.
Yes.
And she sat on a bench in her community, and he realized that the people with depression felt more comfortable talking to her, and she was able to lift their burden.
Yes.
And then you expand it, and you just keep doing one step at a time.
Right.
The highest mountain and the largest journey
begins with the first step.
Putting one foot in front of the next one.
Yes.
But you must never get weary, and you have to be relentless.
Yes.
The school I went to, we had a motto that served me from I left that school until the day I die. And the motto is persevere and excel.
Yes.
Persevere and excel. Be relentless. You just have to do one thing at a time. You don't need to move the mountain. You just need to move one stone and move another stone.
Yes.
And by the time you're done, the entire mountain will be moved.
I'm telling you.
So you just have to focus on one thing
at a time. Or one community, and it's keep going. Remind me of that that goats that's got the tank to move. Keep butting. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yeah. But
if you wait on the resources or
never going to happen. Never going to happen.
One person will see the light.
Yes.
And that one person will make two people see the light, and those two will make four.
That's right. Multiplying. That's right.
And we will keep going forward.
Yes. So it sounds as if we have a plan, Dr. Jeffrey, that we're going to be
absolutely
one community at a time. That's right. Yes. We have to write it down. Very important. We keep forgetting. We just talk and say yes, me do this, yes, me do that, but we have to write it down. Yes. Thanks for that reminder.
If it's not written, it doesn't exist.
It never happened.
And I've learned that in many aspects of my life.
Yes.
If it was not written down,
it is not done.
Nothing goes on.
Yes, right. But Dr. Jeffrey, I wanted to ask you though that and we hear the roots of violence. And how does it translate to mental health and mental illness? We spoke a little bit about some of the aspects of health, but the other, specifically, yes.
So the thing that often gets convoluted and confused is the association with mental illness and violence.
Yes.
And it's not a fair assumption, nor is it supported by most of the evidence.
Right.
Because when you look at our own murder rate, which we have one of the highest rates in the world.
Yes.
And statistically,
the
mental illness most often misrepresented in violence is schizophrenia, which is about 1% of the population. We murder between 1,800 to 2,000 people a year. So out of that, at least 20 of those persons should be killed by schizophrenia, but they are not. At best, when we have one or two murders that happens to people with schizophrenia. It makes the news, and it has a whole entire news cycle.
Yes.
And so it's important to recognize. But there are mental disorders that are very much associated with violence. One of the main ones is alcohol dependency. Alcohol dependency is associated not just with violence, it's associated with suicidal behavior, it's associated with road deaths, it's associated with domestic violence, and it's a huge illness factor because it is probably one, second to personality disorder, it's probably the most prevalent mental illness in the country. We have a large contingency of people who are alcohol dependent, alcohol abusers, and then you have other substances under there. But that's one of the main ones, and so we have to be mindful to provide the support, provide access to care and treatment, and to be able to recognize and help persons to divert this pathological issue and provide interventions for them.
Definitely. Because I'm just wondering, I remember, persons, especially when you speak about domestic violence, and why do people stay? Is that because of some cultural things that have been ingrained in us, and we believe that what is happening?
I think one of the challenges that we are often, and not just us, because look at the literature on psychological trauma and trauma. It has been very clear that it is a topic that people run away from.
Right.
In fact, a lot of Freud's most progressive work was done in his early years when he was working on psychotrauma in the society in women. And when he came to the realization of the impact that it would have on the society, he abandoned it and went on to develop this penile foolishness and other things. A lot of persons, when they touch issues of psychotrauma, like domestic violence, it often is very complicated, and it is often very burdensome to manage for the person going through it and for everyone else.
Yes.
And what you fail to realize is that it's not just about hitting person, slapping somebody and punching someone. The violence occurs long before the first punch is thrown. The violence is, and it has been studied and shown that the systematic engagement of an abusive relationship is identical to brainwashing. It starts with social isolation. It starts with reinforcing platitudes. It starts then with stripping away the social support work and system, alienating the person, isolating them, and then you chip away at their self-esteem, self-confidence, and you slowly put them in a position where they are completely helpless. They are completely at the behest of the abuser because they have no avenue to escape, or they have no avenue for support. And then the abuse starts. The person is left bewildered because they are then confused and they have been psychologically almost brainwashed into this thought that they are the problem.
Right.
And then that is what permeates into a long-standing years and decades of abuse because they have been psychologically controlled, psychologically abused and being done. And they have been so alienated that they don't have the support system or the willpower to be able to and then use of intimidation, fear, I this icon.
Right.
The psychological tools are immense, and the psychological reprogramming and psychological control that exists in that relationship is one of the most difficult to break, even with the strongest person. Because we often forget, when it comes to psychotrauma.
Yes.
Psychotrauma shows us one of the most frightening things about human existence. Every single person can be made to be mentally ill, given the right circumstances. That is one of the most frightening things about psychotrauma and things like PTSD.
Yes. Yes.
Every single one can have it happen to them.
Yes.
Given the right circumstances, right traumatic event. Every single person can be made to be mentally ill, and that is one of the most frightening things. So we have to be able to provide the level of support. Level of connectivity, and this is the thing. That there's a mobile the term that identified that we often think that there are only two participants in a violent abuse relationship, but there are three. There's a perpetrator, there's a victim, and there's a bystander. And the problem is, the bystander is where the problem lies because invariably the bystander sides with the perpetrator, not the victim.
That's interesting.
The perpetrator only asks the bystander to do nothing, but the victim asks for help.
Yes.
And so we have to understand the dynamics of this thing.
Yes.
And help. Yes. And that's why you have a lot of people who blame women. Oh, this woman is weak.
Yes.
This man is weak. Oh, this man is an idiot because they make you man beat him.
Yes.
The bystander is siding with the perpetrator and thus further alienating the victim and perpetuating the abusive relationship, not understanding the level of intense psychological warping that has occurred and the threat that the person is under, both in terms of their physical state, but also integrity and their mental fortitude.
Yeah.
So it is immensely complex.
Yeah.
To simplify.
Yes. And I'm glad that you went through that so that persons understand, how it is that we play a role, what is happening with this individual, how it is that we further stigmatize them and, put them in the position that they're in, instead of seeking to, integrate them into community and see how best we can assist them with getting the help that they need. But you mentioned the domestic violence, the other thing and we spoke about murder. Your thoughts on suicide?
Well, this is the thing about suicide, because we've often had this thought that in our country our suicide rate is low.
Yes.
But one of the things that we've been looking at and actually exploring, which has been very, very difficult to process and to work through, is whether or not there's a correlation between the suicide rate and the murder rate. Because there's such a thing as suicide by proxy or suicide by cop or suicide by gang, where people take on these obvious risks that would inevitably lead to their death, and you're wondering what could be the purpose of it. And I'll share with you a personal case. I had a dear friend of work with the JC. He was very practical gentleman, very clear in his thought. He acted decisive, very confident himself. And I remember while I was with a few friends, and he had passed by and said that he would come by and see us after his shift was. And I saw him at the end of the night, and he was white as a sheet. And this man had a very healthy dose of melanin from birth, but he was white as a sheet. And he could not understand the situation, because he was at this report, he was at the station. A gentleman that was supposed to be reporting on bail came and reported, and they had no issue. I mean, he was always very professional, very pleasant. And he was on patrol, driving through this gentleman's community. Saw the gentleman standing on the side. He had no interest in them. He was not involved in anything in terms of looking for them, because he just reported. And as he drove past, they opened fire at the vehicle, and they had to return fire. And he was bewildered as to why in heaven's name would that be possible. And so part of the challenge that we have to look at is with a lot of these engagements are suicidal. And saw a TikTok video. There's today on with a little gentleman with a machete attacking members of the police force. And I'm saying,
that's deliberate. That's no. Yes.
So it begs to the reasons that whether or not a lot of the suicides that do occur in our country are not subsumed into the violent statistics as murders, where persons, because when you look at things like our police shootings and police killings, it is very, very high of those violent clashes. So suicide in our country is something that we have yet to explore and yet to dissect. But we need to actually set up ways and means of being able to do forensic mental health autopsies to look at some of these cases to see whether or not the behavior pattern driving. Because again, that actually guides public health issue, that these interventions in the community would not do well if we focus on suicide prevention and a psychological aspect to it. Because a lot of these problems may be intertwined. But we have not been able to do the research yet, and it's definitely an area that we need to look at and see what's happening in that field.
Yes. And a lot of times when we think about what's happening and how things are going. I know a lot of persons are a bit disheartened. A lot of our returning residents don't want to come back when we compare, because I've gone and persons have compared with other countries close to us, police don't walk with any gun. The behavior is different and they can't come back here and live. But it gives me some hope to believing that if we work together, planting some trees, as you said, and allowing them to create shade for the generations that are to come, then it gives that hope that we can work together and change the face of thing and how our children, the future for our children.
But there's one other thing I want to talk about, which is the issue of the media. Remember that it's shock and awe that sells paper and sends up ratings. And a lot of the times when people say that, it's because all the information they are getting about what's happening is really just from the media and the social media. If you want to feel less disheartened and more hopeful about this country, just walk into it and spend some time with some people that are there. Because as I said, the majority of people within our society are productive, forward-thinking persons who are doing good work and great things in every aspect. Join a club, join a group, meet people, meet young people who are forward-thinking. And you will see that it is only a small, tiny percentage of people that are causing the problem. But the majority of the coverage is on that. It sells. And
and people love the talk. People love the story.
Exactly.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
People don't want to hear that you have a group of young men who are doing well in robotics, who are taking on the world, and who are. It's a one-page line. This group is now in international competition and they've won third place. But there's no follow-up to talk about where did these young kids come from? What was it like with growing up? There's no fanfare. When you have a murder, when you have a scam case, every paper, you know the lady toenail color by the time you finish the one that is alleged to have done and you know everything about her life. But
can you imagine?
Tell me the name of a young man who has gone internationally and has represented the country proudly and has made us proud. We can't tell you the name. We can't remember one of them names.
No.
But we know where this woman shop, where she much apartment she bought. We know all the things that were going on.
I know. Yes.
But that is the thing. Spend a lot of energy and effort on negativity.
Yes.
And then
we don't highlight those things that can bring us together and bridge some of these challenges that we're having. Dr. Walcott, my producer is saying that she's going to have to bring her back, sir.
Yes. Well, you know, I'm always.
I know. I told her psychiatrist extraordinaire. But it was so good for you to bring, to be a part of this conversation. The wealth of knowledge, the experience, the evidence has been so good and so rich. And I do hope that it will create and generate some excitement in our communities and across the world in getting our people back together, our peoples back together, to see how we can create the place that we really want our children to grow up and live in the next 15 to 20 years, a transformation back to getting that national pride and that pride in community and family and bonding together and allowing everybody to move, as we call it, in positive strides. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and we do appreciate all that you have set aside for us, and we look forward to having you again on our program, sir.
No problem.
I want to
thank you for inviting.
Yes, sir. I want to thank our guests for being a part of us, those on Fit FM 96.7, fitfmja.com, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Friends Who Love Fit FM. We want to thank you for being a part of this program, and we ask that you be back with us right here on Destigmatize next week at 6 p.m. We thank our producer, Madam Producer, for being here. And as we always say, there goes there, but for the grace of God go I. And we want you to remember that there is no good health without good mental health. And we're stepping out with The Mirror by my favorite, Rondell Positive. See you next week. Until then, be safe. Bye.
Oh, yeah. Answers in the mirror. The mirror. In the mirror. Oh, yeah. Say the answers in the mirror.